And this is a vicious circle. When your neighbors increase their military budget, you feel compelled to do the same. And then they increase their budget even more. When I say that the early 21st century was the most peaceful era in human history, it's one of the indications is how low the military budgets all over the world were. For most of history, kings and emperors and khans and sultans, the military was the number one item on their budget. They spent more on their soldiers and navies and fortresses than on anything else. In the early 21st century, most countries spend something like a few percentage points of their budget on the military. Education, healthcare, welfare were a much bigger item on the budget than defense. And this is now changing. The money is increasingly going to tanks and missiles and cyber weapons instead of to nurses and schools and social workers. And again, it's not inevitable. It's the result of human decisions. The relatively peaceful era of the early 21st century, it did not result from some miracle. It resulted from humans making wise decisions in previous decades.
What are the wise decisions we need to make now, in your view?
Reinvest in rebuilding a global order which is based on universal values and norms, and not just on the narrow interests of specific nation states.
Are you concerned that Trump might be elected again shortly?
I think it's very likely. And if it happens, it is likely to be the kind of like the death blow to what remains of the global order. And he says it openly. Now, again, it should be clear that many of these politicians, they present a false dichotomy, a false binary vision of the world, as if you have to choose between patriotism and globalism, between being loyal to your nation and being loyal to some kind of, global government or whatever. And this is completely false. There is no contradiction between patriotism and global cooperation. When we talk about global cooperation, we definitely don't have in mind, at least not anybody that I know, a global government. This is an impossible and very dangerous idea. It simply means that you have certain rules and norms for how different nation states treat each other and behave towards each other. If you don't have a system of global norms and values, then very quickly what you have is just global conflict, is just wars. I mean, some people have this idea, they imagine the world as a network of friendly fortresses. Like each nation will be a fortress with very high walls, taking care of its own interests, but living on relatively friendly terms with the neighboring fortresses, trading with them and whatever. Now, the main problem with this vision is that fortresses are almost never friendly. Each fortress always wants a bit more land, a bit more prosperity, a bit more security for itself at the expense of the neighbors. And this is the high road to conflict and to war.
There's that phrase, isn't there? Ignorance is bliss. Now, something that your work has forced you and continues to encourage you to not live in is ignorance. So with that, one might logically deduce that out the window goes your bliss. Are you happy?
I think I'm relatively happy, at least happier than I was for most of my life. Part of it is that I invest a lot of my time, not just in, researching what is happening in the world, but also in the health of my own mind. and keeping a kind of balanced information diet, that it's basically like with food. You need food in order to survive and to be healthy. But if you eat too much, or if you eat too much of the wrong stuff, it's bad for you. And it's exactly the same with information. Information is the food of the mind.